Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025. President Donald Trump, when asked if he plans to send the National Guard to Chicago to combat crime, saying, "We're going in, I didn't say when." Coming up, the president speaks from the White House Oval Office, and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker holds a news conference in Chicago. A federal judge rules that President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth violated federal law by using the U.S. military to help carry out law enforcement activities in Los Angeles this summer. Congress is back in session after the August break. One of the top items, federal government funding. They have until the end of the month to avoid a shutdown, and Democrats are accusing Republicans of not being willing to negotiate to reach the bipartisan 60 votes needed in the Senate to pass anything. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie introduces a discharge petition that he promised to try to force a House vote on releasing the files related to the investigation of the late sex offender and accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. President Trump announces U.S. Space Command headquarters is moving from Colorado Springs, Colorado to Huntsville, Alabama, and a ceremony at the World War II Memorial in Washington commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of the war, VJ Day, when Japan formally surrendered. That and more coming up on Washington Today. USA Today reports that President Donald Trump declared he plans to send the National Guard into Chicago after the city experienced a violent Labor Day weekend. "We're going in," Trump said during a briefing at the Oval Office on September 2nd. "I didn't say when. Look, I have an obligation," the president told reporters. "This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation." Trump's comments come after he repeatedly targeted California Governor Gavin Newsom, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, and Illinois' J.B. Pritzker, all Democratic governors who've been outspoken against him and are possible 2028 presidential candidates. Chicago police said at least 8 people were killed and another 58 people were injured in shootings across the city over the weekend, according to multiple reports. Trump referenced the deadly holiday weekend, calling Chicago the worst and most dangerous city in the world by far in a post on social media. That was from USA Today. Here's President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office.
Have you decided you're definitely going to send National Guard troops to Chicago?
I didn't say when, but the answer is, look, Chicago's very interesting because I watched Pritzker get up and say about, we don't need help, we're safe. But 2 weeks ago, they had 6 people murdered, and they had 24 people hit by bullets. Last week, as you know, it was 7 people, 24 people hit, and 7 people died. And then over the last 2 days, that was the crown jewel. They had, I guess, 9 or 10 killed, and 50 hit with bullets. And you have this governor get up, who's a terrible governor. Probably he and Gavin Newsom would be probably the 2 worst and most naive. They're naive. Either they're naive or they're very untruthful. And he'll say, we don't want any protection. We don't need. So in the last 3 weeks, he's lost almost 20 people killed. There's no place in the world, including you can go to Afghanistan, you can go to places that you would think of. They don't even come close to this. Chicago is a hellhole right now. Baltimore is a hellhole right now. Parts of Los Angeles are terrible. If we didn't put out the fires, and I mean the other fires, the bullet fires, they didn't do a good job with, they should have had the water coming down, like I said. You know, we had to release the water. We had to go in and release the water to LA. It's so badly run. But if I didn't send the National Guard into Los Angeles, I would be making an announcement today. I'd be talking about Huntsville, and I'd simultaneously be saying, by the way, the Olympics is not coming to Los Angeles. If we didn't do that, and even the sheriff, the top law enforcement person in Los Angeles said, we could not have handled it without them. So that's what he said.
Make your mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when, we're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks, and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. It's in such great shape. You can go and actually walk with your children, your wife, your husband. You can walk right down the middle of the street. You're not going to be shot, Peter. You're safe.
President Donald Trump taking reporters' questions in the White House Oval Office. In Chicago, the governor of Illinois, Democrat J.B. Pritzker, held a news conference.
When did we become a country where it's okay for the U.S. president to insist on national television that a state should call him to beg for anything, especially something we don't want? Have we truly lost all sense of sanity in this nation, that we treat this as normal? As I have done since becoming governor, I've been reflecting on my responsibilities to the people of Illinois. And one of those duties is to share with the public exactly what we know. In the coming days, we expect to see what has played out in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., to happen here in Chicago. First, Donald Trump is positioning armed federal agents and staging military vehicles on federal property, such as the Great Lakes Naval Base. It is likely those agents will be with ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, the Department of Homeland Security, and other similarly situated federal agencies. Many of these individuals are being relocated from Los Angeles for deployment in Chicago. We believe that staging that has already begun started yesterday and continues into today. Second, unidentifiable agents in unmarked vehicles with masks are planning to raid Latino communities and say they're targeting violent criminals. As we saw in Los Angeles, a very, very small percentage of the individuals they will target will be violent criminals. Instead, you're likely to see videos of them hauling away mothers and fathers, traveling to work or picking up their kids from school. Sometimes they will detain, handcuff, and haul away children. They are law-abiding individuals who pay taxes and contribute to the communities, who feel safe going to work and attending mandatory immigration check-ins. In other words, they're following the law. We have reason to believe that Stephen Miller chose the month of September to come to Chicago because of celebrations around Mexican Independence Day that happen here every year. It breaks my heart to report that we have been told ICE will try and disrupt community picnics and peaceful parades. Let's be clear, the terror and cruelty is the point, not the safety of anyone living here. Third, as lawful citizens exercise their First Amendment rights, Trump and his team will be looking for any excuse to put active duty military on our streets, supposedly to protect ICE. We have reason to believe that the Trump administration has already begun staging the Texas National Guard for deployment in Illinois. I want to be very clear on this point, and I want to speak directly to the press right now. We know before anything has happened here that the Trump plan is to use any excuse to deploy armed military personnel to Chicago. If someone flings a sandwich at an ICE agent, Trump will try and go on TV and declare an emergency in Chicago. I'm imploring everyone, if and when that happens, do not take the bait.
Governor J.B. Pritzker, Democrat from Illinois, at a news conference today in Chicago, along with Chicago's mayor and some other state officials. Los Angeles Times writes a federal judge in San Francisco barred soldiers from aiding immigration arrests and other civilian law enforcement in Southern California Tuesday, warning of a growing national police force with the president as its chief in an impassioned order set to take effect September 12th. In a 52-page decision early Tuesday morning, Senior District Judge Charles R. Breyer barred the administration from deploying, ordering, instructing, training, or using California troops to engage in civilian law enforcement, a ruling that could have wide-ranging consequences for Trump's use of the military nationally. About 300 soldiers remain on the streets of Los Angeles, where thousands of National Guard troops and hundreds of Marines were deployed in early June to quell fierce protest over immigration raids. The Department of Justice indicated it would immediately appeal the decision, all but ensuring a stay until the Ninth Circuit can rule on it later this month. That was from the LA Times. And Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat from California, putting out a statement today. The court sided with democracy and the Constitution. No president is a king, not even Trump, and no president can trample a state's power to protect its people. This is Washington Today. Story from the Washington Post. When Congress returns to Washington on Tuesday, lawmakers will have around 4 weeks to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. It's still unclear how or whether they'll pull it off. Most congressional leaders acknowledge they'll probably need to pass a short-term funding extension known as a continuing resolution, given the time crunch. Government funding expires at the end of the day on September 30th, and much of the government would close without action. Congress may struggle to pass even a stopgap fix, though. Republican leaders will need Democratic support to clear the 60-vote filibuster threshold in the Senate. But Democrats, angry from months of party-line maneuvers from the White House and congressional Republicans, haven't settled on a strategy. That was from the Washington Post. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, spoke on the Senate floor about government funding and other items on the Senate agenda this month.
The Senate has taken so far 499 votes this year, more than in any Congress at this point in the last 35 plus years. In fact, we've taken more votes in 2025 already in 8 months than the Senate has taken in a full 12 months for most, all but 2 of the past 36 years. But we have a lot more work to do, and we're going to get it done. That starts this week with consideration of the National Defense Authorization Act, one of the most important pieces of legislation that we consider every year. That will be followed by continued appropriations work so that we can get the government funded by the September 30th deadline. We've already done some good work on appropriations. In fact, for the first time in years, we went into August having passed 3 of the 12 appropriations bills. The last time that happened, a single appropriations bill passed before the August break was 2017. But needless to say, there's a lot more to do. And I hope, Mr. President, that our Democrat colleagues will resist the calls from within for a shutdown and work with us to fund the government.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, today on the Senate floor. A Reuters article notes that President Trump's Republicans hold a 219 to 212 majority in the House and a 53 to 47 edge in the Senate, though that chamber's rules require 60 votes to pass most bills, meaning that 7 Democrats' support would be needed to pass a funding bill. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, wrote in a Dear Colleague letter to other Senate Democrats, the only way to avoid a shutdown is to work in a bipartisan way with a bill that can get both Republican and Democratic votes in the Senate. However, as we near the funding deadline, Republicans are once again threatening to go it alone, heading our country towards a shutdown and making the health care crisis even worse. With the Trump administration's attempt of the so-called pocket rescission, it is clear Republicans are prioritizing chaos over governing, partisanship over partnership, and their own power over the American people. That was from the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, also Democrat from New York, asked about this at a news conference.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. With the government funding deadline coming up, first of all, how closely are you aligned with Chuck Schumer? You had different strategies last time around. And can you imagine any scenario in which Democrats support a clean CR?
House Democrats and Senate Democrats are working closely together. I speak with Leader Schumer regularly, and we will continue to remain in close touch. We have all been very clear that we are willing to find bipartisan common ground in order to pass a spending bill, avoid a reckless Republican government shutdown, and meet the needs of the American people. But that spending bill has to be both bipartisan, a product of negotiation, and it's got to serve the interests of the American people in terms of their health, safety, national security, and economic well-being. The ball is in the court of the Trump administration and Republicans, because if they continue to proceed down the lane of trying to jam a partisan bill down the throats of the American people without working with Democrats in the House or the Senate, our position will be the same as it was in March. We will not support a partisan spending bill put forward by Republicans that hurts everyday Americans.
So a clean CR is off the table.
Clean CR is one of the things that will be the subject of any Four Corners negotiation, but there has been no Four Corners negotiation.
Welcome back, Mr. Leader. The Speaker said the two of you spoke recently about government funding here. From a policy perspective, what is your red line?
We had an opening conversation last week about the importance of trying to find common ground where possible in order to meet the needs of the American people. But in that conversation, I also made clear we're not going to support partisan funding legislation, period, full stop. We're not going to find ourselves in a situation where Republicans at the 11th hour present a partisan spending bill that hurts everyday Americans, hurts children, hurts veterans, hurts seniors, and hurts the very people who this government should be helping. And then Republicans expect that we are just going to fall in line like they do all the time to Donald Trump's extreme agenda. That's not happening. We've been very open and honest about that publicly and in our private conversations.
Did you ask for the D.C. To be free of the National Guard? Did you ask
We had
for
a general conversation as it relates to meeting the needs of the American people in a bipartisan way with a focus on the areas of the economic well-being of the American people, the health of the American people, the public safety of the American people, and the national security of the American people. Those are the four issue areas that have been a constant source of discussion.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, the House Minority Leader, at a news conference today on Capitol Hill. Reuters writes there have been 14 partial government shutdowns since 1981, most of which lasted only a day or two. The most recent stretched over 34 days in December 2018 into January 2019 during President Trump's first term. Another Reuters article today, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent expressed confidence that the Supreme Court will uphold President Donald Trump's use of a 1977 Emergency Powers Law to impose sweeping tariffs on most trading partners, but said the administration has a backup plan if it does not. A divided U.S. Appeals Court ruled on Friday that most of Donald Trump's tariffs are illegal, undercutting the Republican president's use of the levies as a key economic policy tool. The court allowed the tariffs to remain in place through October 14th to give the Trump administration a chance to file an appeal with the Supreme Court. That was from the article from Reuters. President Donald Trump said they'll be asking for the Supreme Court to take that up this week.
My question is, I suspect you're going to appeal that all the way to the Supreme Court.
Well, we already have, yeah. In fact, we're doing something else. We're going to be going to the Supreme Court, we think, tomorrow, because we need an early decision. I mean, look, the financial fabric of our country, we're a rich, incredible country right now, and we're able to, other countries use tariffs on us for years, and we never did. I did a lot during my first term, but then we had COVID, and we had to focus on other things. You couldn't be tariffing Italy, Spain, France, as they were dying by the thousands and millions. But we did with China, and China paid us billions and billions of dollars, and I started the process, but then I had to end it a little bit because of COVID. We focused on that. But no, it's a very important decision, and frankly, if they make the wrong decision, it would be a devastation for our country. We've taken in trillions of dollars, and by the way, all these countries signed agreements. As an example, they're all happy, everybody's happy. But some whack job put in a lawsuit. It went before a very liberal court, and the liberal court ruled, it was 11, they ruled 7-4, with one of the most liberal of them all voting in our favor because they're patriots. I think I give tremendous credit to that judge, and now it's going to the Supreme Court. Now we're going to be asking for early admittance. We're going tomorrow, and we're going to ask for an expedited ruling because When you look at the stock market's down today, the stock market's down because of that, because the stock market needs the tariffs. They want the tariffs. If you look at AI, all of those, all of that money that's going to be invested, trillions and trillions of dollars, the biggest thing, bigger than the internet, I suspect. It's the internet plus 3 or 4 other things combined. We are leading very substantially with AI. We're leading because of tariffs. We're leading because of talent, and this is where they'd like to be. But without the tariffs, we wouldn't have a chance because we wouldn't be able to protect those investments of the companies coming in. So if you took away tariffs, we could end up being a third world country. That's how big the ruling. So we're asking for an expedited ruling.
President Donald Trump, during his White House Oval Office news conference on the Senate floor on Capitol Hill, the Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke about the president's position on tariffs.
Donald Trump is a liar through and through. It's been his MO his whole life. I've seen that in New York. He's lied to the American people, lied about the economy, about fixing inflation, about peace in Europe and the Middle East, lied about Epstein, the Epstein files, lied about elections, lied about Social Security and Medicaid. One lie after another and another. Let's start with the economy and Donald Trump's tariffs. Donald Trump said his tariffs would bring liberation to America. This has turned out to be one big, fat lie. Companies are losing revenues, shedding jobs, raising costs. Just look at companies, great American companies like John Deere and Caterpillar. They're strong, they're solid, they've always been a rock of America. But last month, they reported losses in the hundreds of millions and layoffs in the hundreds. Why? Donald Trump did it. Nothing to do with farm conditions. The tariffs did it. Or look at retailers like Target and Walmart. Not to mention every grocery store chain in America. They're all raising prices. Hormel, they're raising the price of pork and beef. J.M. Smucker, which runs Folgers and Dunkin' Donuts and other coffee brands, said prices for its products will keep going up. Why? Trump's tariffs. Plain and simple. No ands, ifs, or buts. But of course, Donald Trump will lie to the American people about his failures. As we've said, that's been his MO all along. Here's what he said on Monday. He said on Monday, he tweeted that prices are way down in the U.S. with virtually no inflation. Every single person in America knows that's a lie. Anyone who buys anything knows it's a lie. Every one of the 77 million Americans who voted for Trump, they know he's lying.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. Wall Street today, the Dow down 249, NASDAQ down 175, S&P down 44. This is Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio. Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, writing on X this morning, I am in D.C. and will file the discharge petition today, September 2nd, at approximately 2 p.m., when Congress officially returns from the August recess. At that point, we can begin collecting the 218 signatures necessary to force a vote on binding legislation to release the Epstein files. Those files are from the Justice Department investigation of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, who died by suicide in prison while facing sex trafficking charges. The lead Democrat on the discharge petition is Ro Khanna of California. Discharge petition is the procedural maneuver that can force a vote on the House floor over the wishes of the majority leadership, Republicans in this case. Washington Post article reads, several accusers of Epstein and his ex-partner Ghislaine Maxwell, who was serving 20 years in prison for sex trafficking, will be on Capitol Hill on Tuesday. They'll meet privately with House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, according to a senior leadership aide, as well as House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, and other members of the Oversight Committee. The Oversight Committee is in the midst of an investigation into Epstein and has promised to release Epstein files it has subpoenaed from the Justice Department. A bipartisan legislative effort for more public access is also in progress, referencing the Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna discharge petition. That was from the Washington Post. Speaker Mike Johnson and James Comer spoke with reporters after their meeting in private. Here is Speaker Johnson.
President, as repeatedly referred to this as the Epstein hoax, you just talked to these victims. Is it a hoax?
I'm not sure what that comment refers to, but I've spoken to the president myself about this many times, and he is as insistent as we are. He is the most transparent president in memory, probably in the history of the country. As you know, he stops. If he were here now, he would stand here and take your questions endlessly. That's his mindset, and he wants the American people to have information so they can draw their own conclusions. I've talked with him about this very subject myself, so I can tell you that is his heart. Now, he also, just as we do, is insistent that we protect the innocent victims, and that's what this has been about. There'll be votes in the House this week to advance this and affirm what it's doing. We want everybody in the House wants to go on record in affirming what our Oversight Committee is doing in a bipartisan fashion. There's a discharge petition that is pending, and the reason that I was not comfortable with that and still am not comfortable with the discharge petition is because it was inartfully drafted. It does not adequately protect the innocent victims, and that is a critical component of this. So the work is being done. The Department of Justice and the administration are in full compliance with every congressional subpoena. In fact, they're moving it quickly. And so the American people are owed this information, and the expectation is it will come out soon.
House Speaker Mike Johnson meeting with reporters after he and the House Oversight Committee members met with those victims of Jeffrey Epstein. The Democrats on the committee also came out and held a news conference. Here's Latifah Simon of California.
Good afternoon, everyone. Latifah Simon from California's 12th District. Today we had the honor of listening to extremely brave women who talked about the ongoing rape and sexual exploitation that they endured by the rich and the powerful. And for 3 decades, their voices have been ignored. These are young women who have been on record telling their stories, and yet justice has been denied. Justice has been denied to the young woman who talked about being groomed to go over Jeffrey Epstein's home where she was raped. Children leaving high school to be raped and left to go home alone to then go to school the next day. One of the things that I will tell you, the brave and courageous women today, what they did with both Republicans and Democrats, they sat before us at a round table and gave us their souls, believing that maybe this time they would get justice. Maybe this time they would be seen as children, not adultified by men who ravish their bodies. Maybe then they thought today, if they testified in front of this hearing, that we as members of Congress would not only lift up their stories and seek justice, that we would hear the truth in the life of girls and young people all over this country who are continuously bought and sold, who never seek justice. Because they too, like these women, fear retribution. If we are worth our names on our letterhead, we will not only seek justice and get answers, we will work to protect these women. We will work to ensure that every individual, every adult that had anything to do with their trafficking, their rape, that they are held to account. For over 30 years, I have worked with young women who have been moved through the trafficking channels of this country, and we rarely see them getting justice. Today, hopefully, will be a new day. Oversight Dems, we are working extremely hard with our colleagues, and we are so proud of our leadership. Now we have to move on, get answers, provide protection and support for these women so that more folks come forward, and that the United States is looked upon, hopefully, as a country that protects children, that protects young women, that ensures that if you hurt one of our children, you will absolutely be held to the maximum levels of accountability. Thank you all.
Congresswoman Latifah Simon, Democrat from California, news conference today on Capitol Hill with other Democrats on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee after a private meeting with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. The House Rules Committee meeting today to set the rules for floor debate on a resolution related to Epstein. It would, quote, direct the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to continue its ongoing investigation into the possible mismanagement of the federal government's investigation of Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell, and for other purposes. Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, who is spearheading a discharge petition effort to force a House vote on releasing all the Epstein files, putting out a statement. Speaker Johnson just scheduled this meaningless vote to provide political cover for those members who don't support our bipartisan legislation to force the release of the Epstein files. Here's some of the House Rules Committee debate. The chair is Virginia Fox, Republican from North Carolina.
HRES 668 directs the Oversight Committee to continue its work in investigating and obtaining relevant documents related to the Epstein files. So far, the Oversight Committee has issued subpoenas on a bipartisan basis and has collected tens of thousands of documents from the Department of Justice. Chairman Comer has been conducting and leading this investigation with openness and diligence. It's how Congress is supposed to operate. We should all take note of how quickly the DOJ has responded to these bipartisan subpoenas. When was the last time anyone can remember the DOJ, under any administration, responding to a subpoena in less than a month? Our Democrat colleagues have a unique opportunity here in the Rules Committee today. So unique, in fact, that they can join Republicans in a spirit of bipartisanship. They can support, as Republicans intend to do, the Oversight Committee's continued work to investigate and publicly release the Epstein files. Now our Democrat colleagues will predictably say that legislation is a distraction. And if they don't want to support transcribed interviews, more documents being obtained, and the bipartisan work of the Oversight Committee, it will be rather intriguing. See, their newfound interest in the Epstein files, and yes, it's entirely newfound, will be brought into even more question. They didn't say a peep the last 4 years when they had the opportunity to release the files. They did nothing. The only reason why they've latched themselves to the Epstein files as of late is because they see it as a politically advantageous opportunity. Let's see what they decide to do.
Congresswoman Virginia Fox, Republican of North Carolina, chairs the Rules Committee. The ranking Democrat on the committee is Jim McGovern of Massachusetts.
We are supposed to be here to do the people's work, fund the government, keep our water safe, make energy affordable. But let's be honest, this majority has one obsession: burying the Epstein files. That's the through line. Every delay, every diversion, every broken promise, it all comes back to the same thing: protecting the powerful instead of telling the truth. We saw it before the August district work period. You voted against transparency again and again, voted against releasing the Epstein files again and again. Then you guys rolled out a laughable resolution by my good friend, Mr. Norman, a press release dressed up as a bill, a resolution which didn't even have the force of law, and then you guys skipped town without even ever voting on it. Republicans paraded around a fake resolution, but never voted on it because you never planned to vote on it. It was completely fake, concocted to make it look like Republicans were doing something. And here you go again, another fake resolution that literally directs a committee to do what it was already doing. Republicans are trying to kick the can down the road even more, telling oversight, keep looking into it. Give me a break. Translation, you want a congressional committee to slow walk the release of just some of the files. At this point, Republicans should just admit that you're covering for your rich and powerful friends. It's that simple. This isn't complicated.
Congressman Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, ranking member on the Rules Committee at today's Rules Committee meeting, which sets the rules for debate for bills and resolutions on the House floor. More from the Washington Post article, Congressman Thomas Massie and Congressman Ro Khanna intend to hold a news conference Wednesday with about a dozen survivors of Epstein's abuse outside the U.S. Capitol. Some survivors are expected to speak publicly for the first time, and we will have coverage of that on the C-SPAN networks. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Coming up live Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN Radio, Nigel Farage, a member of the British Parliament and leader of the Reform UK political party, testifies before the House Judiciary Committee on how Great Britain's and the European Union's online policies impact U.S. speech and innovation. That's live at 10 a.m. Eastern Time here on C-SPAN Radio. Remember, you can find all our schedule information on our website, c-span.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Des Moines Register, Iowa Senator Joni Ernst will not seek a third term in the U.S. Senate in 2026, she announced in a video message. Ernst was first elected to the Senate in 2014 and is serving her second term. She's the first woman elected to Congress from Iowa and the first female combat veteran to serve in the Senate. The former state senator served in the Iowa Army National Guard for 23 years and retired as lieutenant colonel. That was from the Des Moines Register. Here is the senator's video.
My fellow Iowans, serving as your United States Senator is the privilege of a lifetime. From growing up and working on my family's farm in rural southwest Iowa to more than 2 decades of leadership in the U.S. Army Reserves and Iowa Army National Guard, where I deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, to my work as Montgomery County Auditor, State Senator, and now as your United States Senator. It has been an honor to dedicate my life to the service of our great state and country. Having been raised in a family who has given me so much love and support, now, as our family ages and grows, it's my time for me to give back to them. After a tremendous amount of prayer and reflection, I will not be seeking re-election in 2026. This was no easy decision. I love my state and country. It's the very reason why I decided to wear our nation's uniform and run for elected office in the first place. I never imagined this farm girl would have the opportunity to serve as a lieutenant colonel and then a United States Senator. Only in America and by the grace of God. 11 years ago, Iowans elected me as the first female combat veteran to the U.S. Senate, and they did so with a mission in mind, to make Washington squeal. And I'm proud to say we have delivered. We've cut waste, fraud, and abuse across the federal government and reined in overburdensome rules and regulations. We've protected the lives of the unborn, prevented violence against women, supported our hardworking farmers, families, and small businesses, honored and fought for our fellow veterans, and strengthened our military and the brave men and women who choose to serve. As a proud Harley rider, you can rest assured I'm not slowing down anytime soon. There is still so much to accomplish before the end of my term, and I'll keep fighting every single day, as I always have, to make Iowans' voices heard loud and clear in the halls of Congress. While this chapter of elected service will soon close, I will always find ways to best serve my community, state, and these great United States of America.
Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa, posting that video today. She is the 8th U.S. Senator to announce a retirement in 2026, 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. National News Desk writes that her decision to leave the seat could make the race in red-leaning Iowa more evenly matched, where Democrats are also hoping to take back the governorship with the departure of Governor Kim Reynolds. And the party also saw a boost, winning a special election for the state Senate in a district easily won by President Trump last November. That was from the National News Desk article. And already we're hearing this afternoon that Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, Republican of Iowa, has jumped into the race for U.S. Senate. Story from the New York Times. Congressman Gerald Nadler, a New York Democrat who has been one of Congress's leading liberal voices for 3 decades, will not seek re-election next year, heeding a call for generational change roiling his party. The decision will mark the close of a 34-year congressional career that put Mr. Nadler at the center of major civil rights battles and 3 presidential impeachments. It will also almost certainly touch off a crowded primary fight over a rare open Democratic seat in the heart of Manhattan. That was from the New York Times. Congressman Clay Higgins, Republican of Louisiana, today resigned from the Homeland Security Committee, saying the committee's leadership is moving in a direction that is not as conservative as he would like it to be. Higgins lost a race for committee chair last month in a multi-candidate field. The winner was Andrew Garbarino of New York. The House reading clerk, Susan Cole, read Congressman Higgins' letter on the House floor today, taking himself off of the committee.
To the Congress of the United States, Mr. Speaker, I am providing official notice of my intent to withdraw from the House Homeland Security Committee effective immediately. Over the course of my 9 years in Congress, I have been a dedicated servant to we the people through the House Homeland Security Committee, fighting for the American First agenda, enforcement of American law, and security of American sovereignty. My Republican colleagues have chosen an alternate path for the committee that I helped to build, a path more in alignment with the less conservative factions of our conference, factions whose core principles are quite variant from my own conservative perspective on key issues like amnesty, ICE operations, and opposition to the surveillance state. Therefore, recognizing that I would be in opposition to the core principles and agenda of the newly elected chairman, I withdraw my presence from the House Homeland Security Committee. Signed sincerely, Clay Higgins, Member of Congress.
The House reading clerk Susan Cole during today's House session. From CNN, California's redistricting battle has now reached the airwaves, unleashing an advertising blitz that is expected to grow only more urgent and staggeringly costly in the post-Labor Day sprint to the November special election. On Tuesday, groups on both sides of the fight in California launched their first major salvos in the ad wars that are sure to dominate Golden State televisions and devices over the next 9 weeks. That was from the CNN article. Here are 2 of the ads put out by the groups Yes on 50 and Protect Voters First.
Following the dictator's playbook, Donald Trump has unleashed a blitzkrieg, arresting people without warrants, targeting the free press, attacking universities. Now he's coming directly for our democracy with a scheme to rig the next election. You have the power to stop him. Prop 50, the Election Rigging Response Act, puts our elections back on a level playing field by putting power in the hands of the people. Save democracy in all 50 states. Yes on 50.
Proposition 50 threatens what voters built. Voters approved an independent commission that spent thousands of hours meeting with California citizens to create fair election districts where all people are represented and voters decide who gets elected, not politicians. Prop 50 destroys this good work. Prop 50 is a direct attack on democracy, a dangerous idea that tears away the power of choice. Protect your vote and democracy. Vote no on Prop 50.
Those ads now running in California. It's a story from Bloomberg News. A congressman from Texas is asking a federal judge to block a retaliatory move by California to wipe out Republican congressional gains. The Trump administration hopes to secure through Texas's controversial mid-decade redistricting. California's response to Texas in the form of a constitutional amendment election is, quote, plainly unconstitutional and retaliatory. Congressman Ronnie Jackson, a Republican, said in a lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas. If California succeeds, Jackson says it will dilute his power as a Republican member in the House and leave him vulnerable to losing his chair on 2 subcommittees. That was from Bloomberg News. This is Washington Today. From CBS News, President Trump announced Tuesday afternoon that U.S. Space Command headquarters is moving from Colorado Springs, Colorado to Huntsville, Alabama. In 2018, he signed an order reestablishing U.S. Space Command after it had been absorbed in 2002 into U.S. Strategic Command. Its main goal is to find ways to defend U.S. interests in space. In 2023, President Joe Biden had decided to keep Space Command headquarters in Colorado, where its temporary headquarters was located, overturning Mr. Trump's first-term decision to move it to Alabama. Some of the reporting from CBS News, President Trump made the announcement in the White House Oval Office with the Alabama Congressional delegation in attendance.
And I am thrilled to report that the U.S. Space Command headquarters will move to the beautiful locale of a place called Huntsville, Alabama, forever to be known from this point forward as Rocket City. Okay, so Huntsville, Alabama, we love Alabama. I only won it by about 47 points. I don't think that influenced my decision, though, right? That didn't, right? But we had a lot of competition for this, and Alabama's getting it, Huntsville in particular, so congratulations, everybody. Katie, congratulations. This will result in more than 30,000 Alabama jobs, and probably much more than that, and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and that's billions, because it can't be millions, it's billions and billions of dollars. Most importantly, this decision will help America defend and dominate the high frontier, as they call it.
President Trump in the White House Oval Office, the entire Colorado congressional delegation, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, put out a joint statement that begins today's decision to move U.S. Space Command's headquarters out of Colorado and to Alabama will directly harm our state and the nation. We are united in fighting to reverse this decision. Bottom line, moving Space Command headquarters weakens our national security at the worst possible time. Moving Space Command sets our space defense apparatus back years, wastes billions of taxpayer dollars, and hands the advantage to the converging threats of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. The Department of Defense's Inspector General has reported multiple times that moving the command will impede our military's operational capabilities for years. Part of the statement from the united congressional delegation from Colorado, Republicans and Democrats. Here's more from President Trump's announcement on why he made the move.
In my first term, I created a thing called Space Force, so important. You know, we were losing the race in space very badly to China and to Russia, and now we're far and away number one in space, and reestablished Space Com with a mission to protect American space assets and detect any threat to our homeland. We initially selected Huntsville for the Spacecom headquarters, yet those plans were wrongfully obstructed by the Biden administration. And as you know, they moved them to a different locale. And today we're moving forward with what we want to do and the place that we want to have this. And this will be there for hopefully hundreds of years. That's where it's going to be. I will say I want to thank Colorado. The problem I have with Colorado, one of the big problems, they do mail-in voting. They went to all mail-in voting. So they have automatically crooked elections. And we can't have that. When a state is for mail-in voting, that means they want dishonest elections, because that's what that means. So that played a big factor also.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. Story from CBS News. The U.S. military on Tuesday struck a drug-carrying boat hailing from Venezuela, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, as tensions spike between the Trump administration and the Venezuelan government. President Trump announced the strike in an unrelated Tuesday afternoon Oval Office event, saying the military had shot out the boat moments ago. He said his team had been briefed on the strike by General Dan Kane, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Minutes later, Rubio posted on X the military carried out a lethal strike in the southern Caribbean Sea. He said the drug vessel had departed Venezuela and was being operated by a designated narco-terrorist organization. That was from CBS News. Secretary Rubio in Miami meeting with the Polish foreign minister talking about NATO issues, spoke to reporters and got questioned about this.
Any additional details to share about the Venezuela strike now?
Well, the president made the announcement and said it was a lethal strike. I think the Pentagon will have more details and other things to offer you here in the next few hours, hopefully.
Say what kind of a vessel it was? Yeah, vessel.
The drug vessel was carrying drugs.
Size?
I'll refer you to the Pentagon. They'll give you more details on that when in the next. I anticipate shortly, probably while we're in the air.
How many deaths with the lethal force?
Again, look, I'm trying to be evasive. I'll let the Pentagon answer that. Suffice it to say that the president is going to be on offense against drug cartels and drug trafficking in the United States. It destabilizes not just the country, but the entire Caribbean basin. These particular drugs were probably headed to Trinidad or some other country in the Caribbean, at which point they just contribute to the instability these countries are facing. So the president's been very clear that he's going to use the full power of America and the full might of the United States to take on and eradicate these drug cartels, no matter where they're operating from and no matter how long they've been able to act with impunity. Those days are over.
The vessels are still in the region. Do you plan those operations to continue? Do you expect those operations to continue?
I think as long as those vessels are in the region and as long as the president's in the White House, he's made very clear he's not going to allow the United States to continue to be flooded with cocaine and fentanyl and other drugs coming from different places, this one from Venezuela, which is a common route that, by the way, some of it ends up in Europe, a lot of it ends up in Puerto Rico and then on into the United States mainland. So no one should be surprised. That's why they're there on a counter-drug mission, and they're going to continue to operate. As far as specifics and future operations, I have to refer you to the Pentagon on that. This is a DoD operation.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking to reporters in Miami. The U.S. Marine Corps band at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. on this VJ Day, marking the 80th anniversary of the formal surrender of Japan to the U.S. and other allied nations, ending the war. David Yoho, who joined the U.S. Merchant Marine when he was 16 years old, serving aboard a tanker supplying combat ships in the South Pacific, spoke on behalf of all the World War II veterans in attendance.
Now I ask you to reflect on what this means to us. I am one of them, I am part of them, and I speak for them. We were like you at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years of age. We were like you. Did you have dreams of your future? Graduating from high school, going to a prom, going to dances, dating your first girl, driving your first car, drinking a Coca-Cola. We had those dreams, but they were never fulfilled because we were called by our country, and we took an oath to pledge that what we did would help mankind. And if you view the movie Saving Private Ryan, two things I will call to your attention. If you haven't seen it recently, watch it again. Watch the first 20 minutes, and you'll understand combat. You'll understand what they experience. And there's another passage in there, and it takes place at the cemetery, the military cemetery in France. And we, my wife and I, have been invited twice to be the speakers on D-Day, first on the 75th anniversary and then this last 80th anniversary. But go back to that scene. And an old man kneels before a cross in that cemetery, and he says these words: "Did I lead a worthy life? Did what I did count for anything? Did I represent the oath I took?" And from that, I had the good experience to meet the director of that film, and I said to him, that stays with me. Every time I speak in the cemetery, I think about that. Take a walk with me, if you will. Will you walk with me? And you walk over to those stars that you see described. Every one of those stars represents 100 of us who didn't come back. Every one of those stars also represent the families that they left behind, the children, the mothers, the sisters, the brothers, the wives that we left behind.
World War II veteran David Yoho at today's ceremony at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. on this 80th anniversary of the end of the war, VJ Day, victory over Japan. CBS News reported on Saturday that longtime CBS News correspondent Mark Knoller has died at the age of 73. The article goes on, Knoller was, to put it simply, a legend. For decades, everyone in the White House press corps knew him as the unofficial presidential historian and statistician. His frustration over the lack of a central database of daily presidential actions inspired him to take upon himself the enormous burden of keeping meticulous records of every presidential act, movement, and utterance, single-handedly filling an immense void in American history. That was from the CBS News article. Mark Knoller spoke about this on C-SPAN in 2009.
Back in the 90s, I noted that Bill Clinton was making an awful lot of trips to California. And I thought, gee, it would be interesting to know and report how often he had gone there. So I started keeping track. And it's a reporting device. It enables me to illustrate points about the presidency with hard numbers, how many trips domestic a president has been on, how many times a president has been to a certain state, how many pardons, how many vetoes. All of these are numbers that illustrate a presidency. They're not a substitute for reporting, but I think they add a lot to it, and a lot of my colleagues seem to agree and often come to ask for numbers on certain aspects of the presidency.
Longtime CBS News correspondent Mark Knoller on C-SPAN in 2009. He passed away over the weekend at age 73. One of the tributes coming from the current ABC News chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl, writing on X, he was a generous colleague. Like so many others, I relied heavily on his self-created database of presidential activity. And then in parentheses, hey Mark, how many times has President Bush stopped by the Crawford coffee station? And at key moments along the way, his dry sense of humor. One more thing, Knoller was a reporter's reporter. He reported the facts. I never had any clue what his political views were, or even if he had any. Also, a note that Mark Knoller will be the subject of the next episode of C-SPAN's podcast, The Weekly, including his top moments on C-SPAN, what he said, what colleagues said about him, how presidents and White House press secretaries used his legendary stats. The podcast will be available September 4th, wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.